Wound edges tell you almost everything you need to know about whether a wound will heal. Most people look at the wound bed first, the tissue, the drainage, the size. But the problem is you can have perfect looking tissue in the center and the wound still fails. The real story is it's all in the edges. For those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Cassandra Voltaire. I work mostly in skilled nursing facilities where supplies are tight and time is even tighter. And I can tell you, once I learned how to read the edges of wounds, everything changed. You don't need fancy certifications or years of experience. You just need to know what to look at, which is why in this video, I am going to show you exactly what to look for when it comes to wound edges, what it means, and what you should do depending on what you see. Let's get right into it. Let's start here. You walk into a room. Your patient has a pressure injury on their heel. It's been there for 3 weeks. The wound bed looks decent. Some granulation tissue, no heavy drainage. But when you look at the edges, really look, you notice something. They're rolled, thick, almost like a lip curling inward. What does that mean? Wound edges, also known as the parawound, fall into 4 main categories. Each one tells a different story. You have attached edges. These are flat and smooth. They blend right into the wound bed. This is what healing looks like. The skin is trying to close the gap. New cells are migrating inward. If you see attached edges, you're on the right track. Rolled or pibbly edges. These edges curl under like a taco shell folding in on itself. They look thick and raised and sometimes shiny. This means the wound has stalled. The cells at the edge have stopped migrating. They've stopped trying to close. So you'll see this a lot in chronic wounds like pressure injuries, venous ulcers, and diabetic foot ulcers. You also have undermined or tunneled edges. This is when the tissue under the skin has separated, but the top layer hasn't caught up yet. You might see a small opening on the surface, but when you gently probe with a cotton swab, it goes deep, sometimes several centimeters. Undermining usually means there's been shear force or pressure from the inside out. It's common in sacral wounds or areas where bone is close to the surface. You also have macerated edges. These edges are white and soggy and wrinkled looking, like your fingers after a long bath. This means there's too much moisture. The skin is breaking down. It's not infected, it's just drowning. You'll see this when drainage isn't managed well or dressing isn't absorbing enough. Now here's the thing. You could have more than one type of edge on the same wound. You might see attached edges on one side and rolled edges on the other. That tells you healing is happening in some areas, but stalling in others. And that's your clue. That's where you focus. So let's say you've identified the edge type. Now what? Because knowing what you're looking at is only half the battle. The other half is knowing what it's trying to tell you and what you need to change. Rolled edges are one of the most frustrating things you'll see because on paper, everything looks fine. The wound is clean, there's no infection, you're doing all the right things, but it's not closing. Here's why. When a wound becomes chronic, the cells at the edge get tired. They stop responding to the signals that tell them to move inward and close the gap. It's called senescence. The cells are still alive, but they're not working anymore. So what do? You have to wake them up. Sometimes that means sharp debridement, which is carefully trimming away that rolled edge to expose fresh tissue underneath. Other times it means changing your dressing strategy. For example, if you've been using a foam dressing, you might switch to something that promotes better moisture balance, like a hydrocolloid or a silicone contact layer. Products like Meptel 1 or Adaptive Touch work well because they don't stick to the wound bed, but they keep the edges moist and protected. The goal is to restart the healing process at the edge. Undermining is your body's way of saying something went wrong under the surface. Maybe there was pressure, maybe there was shear, maybe both. But the damage happened deeper than what you can see. Here's what you need to do. First, measure it. So use a cotton swab or probe and gently probe around the edges. Note the depth and the direction like on a clock face. So for example, undermining at 3 o'clock, 2 centimeters deep. This helps you track whether it's getting better or worse. Second, you need to fill that space. If you just put a flat dressing on top, you're leaving a dead space underneath. That's where infection hides. So instead, use a filler like calcium alginate rope, a foam strip, or even a hydrogel if the wound is dry. You want to gently pack the undermined area so it heals from the inside out. And third, this is key. You need to address the cause. So if it's a sacral wound, reposition the patient. Use a pressure relieving cushion. Get the care team involved. Because if you don't fix the pressure, the undermining will just come back. Maceration is one of the easiest problems to fix, but also one of the most overlooked. It happens when there's too much moisture sitting on the skin. Maybe the wound is draining more than you thought. Maybe the dressing isn't absorbent enough. Maybe it's being changed too infrequently. So here's the fix. Switch to more absorbent dressing. Foams work well. So do super absorbent dressings like Dry Max or Clips. You can also use a barrier cream or ointment around the edges, something like a zinc oxide or a silicone-based protectant. This creates a shield so the moisture doesn't damage the healthy skin. And if the wound is really wet, consider more frequent dressing changes. I know that's not always easy in a skilled nursing facility setting, but even going from every 3 days to every 2 days can make a difference. By the way, if you want downloadable guides, real case discussions, and step-by-step protocols on wound edge assessment, I put together a community called the Wound Care Circle. It's where I share tools like this, answer questions together with other members, and walk through real cases with nurses and other providers to help with improving wound care outcomes. So click on the link in the description to check it out. All right, let's keep going. Let me tell you about a patient I'll never forget. Her name was Miss C. She was A2 and she had a stage 3 pressure injury on her left heel. It had been there for 6 weeks. We were doing everything right, or so we thought. The wound bed looked good. Pink tissue, minimal drainage, no odor, but it wasn't closing. Every week I'd measure it, and every week it was the same size. I started to feel like I was missing something. One day, I sat down next to her bed and really looked at the edges, and that's when I saw it. The entire perimeter of the wound was rolled and thick and shiny, like a wall around the wound. I realized then the wound bed had been healing, but the edges had given up. So I did some sharp debridement and trimmed away that rolled edge and left just a thin layer, and suddenly we had fresh bleeding tissue at the perimeter. It sounds intense, but it wasn't. It was exactly what we needed. Within 2 weeks, the wound started to close. We switched to a silicone contact layer to keep the edges moist and protected. We kept her heel elevated. We kept her nutrition up, and 4 weeks later, the wound was closed. Here's what I learned. You can do everything right and still fail if you're not looking at the edges. The edges are where healing starts and where it stops. If they're not healthy, nothing else matters. So let's come back to where we started. You walk into a room, you see a wound. Before you look at the tissue, before you measure the size, before you check the drainage, look at the edges. Are they attached, rolled, undermined, macerated? Because that one observation will tell you more than anything else. It'll tell you if the wound is healing. It'll tell you what's working, and it'll tell you what needs to change. But recognizing them is only half the story. The real challenge is knowing what to do once you see one. And there's an approach I've started using that simplifies this entire decision-making process and has changed my patient's healing time in a major way, which is why I made a video explaining this exact approach. So click this next video on the screen where I go over when to leave wounds alone, how to help them heal faster, and how to know when a wound needs debridement. Stay informed and heal well.